Hey guys, Michael here with Various Engineering, and today we're going to install an AOS kit with a coolant add-on onto our FL5 Civic Type-R. First thing you're going to do, pop the hood. I like to have it in service position for this, and let's get to what comes in our kit. This is everything included in our FL5 AOS kit. You're going to see the AOS itself, along with some button head cap screws and washers to mount it to our bracket. Couple hose clamps that go with our 1/2 inch to 3/8 reducers. There's going to be 2 of those. We're also going to have a 5/16 hose adapter, a couple of zip ties, a 6-inch section of 3/8 hose, and then there's going to be one long section of 1/2 inch hose. This is going to get cut into a 30-inch section and a 37-inch section. This is everything we need in our coolant add-on kit. You're going to see a couple button head cap screws with washers to mount our actual coolant adapter plate. This plate is going to have a groove on the backside to house this O-ring. The threaded portions are where our banjo bolts, our barbed banjo fittings with sealing washers are going to go. You're going to have a couple hose clamps, zip ties to tie the hose up out of the way, and some 5/16 hose. This hose is going to end up getting cut into 2 sections. There's a 15-inch section and a 33-inch section. Laid out here is all the tools we're going to need today to install our AOS. We're going to need a 4mm Allen. We're going to need a Phillips head screwdriver. We're going to need a couple ratchets. I used a small extension along with this 5.5mm socket. You can also replace that with a 7/32. Need a 10mm socket and an 18mm socket. You're going to need some needle nose and or hose clamp pliers if those are available. To remove the one-time use clamps that Honda uses, you can cut a slot in them and then spin them out with a pocket screwdriver or just cut them off entirely. Our kit replaces those. Some razor blade and or scissors or a hose cutter to cut our hoses to length, as well as some snips to trim our zip ties. Pretty minimal list today, but let's get to installing our kit. I'll first install this bracket onto the AOS without the coolant kit. So you just put this here, use your supplied button head cap screws, thread these on, tighten them up, just a couple foot-pounds, and that'll be ready to go on the car. The coolant adapter kit, if you chose that, it actually goes on first. First thing you want to do is place your O-ring. It's easier if you start from the bottom and end at the top. It is kind of tricky to get this to stay in place. You may use, I know people to use Vaseline or any sort of really grease to keep this O-ring in place. It's not going to hurt it. And just like that. That should be how it sits. Make sure none of this pops out as you're going on. Ooh, upside down. But you're only going to use these 4 outer. Tighten these down, and then we'll throw our bracket on. Bracket goes on over top like so. Now we're going to go ahead and pre-assemble our banjo fittings. It goes washer, barb fitting, and then another washer. And then we'll tighten that in. Just leave it loose for now. Washer, barb, washer. Once we have our AOS pre-assembled, we're going to have to remove this engine cover. We're going to have 5 of these 10mm head shoulder bolts, and you just lift up once those are removed, and this is what you should see. Once you have the engine cover removed, we're going to go up over here onto the firewall. Next to this bracket here, you're going to see it's going to be covered up, but you need to trim the actual firewall heat shielding to reveal this M6 threaded hole. Be sure not to damage this hose, but that's going to be one of our mounting holes. Once we have our hole trimmed there, we're going to need to give ourselves a little more room to work with this PCV hose back here. So you're just going to push this tab on the ignition coil harness, slide this big section over, and you can bring it up. and give yourself a little more wiggle room to get to that clamp. This PCV hose I'm talking about is this one right here. Goes to the valve cover, runs down, and actually plugs into the intake manifold down there. We're gonna need to undo this at both ends and fully remove it, and we're gonna reinstall it immediately after. Here's that PCV hose I was talking about. It runs to the valve cover, down, and actually connects to the intake manifold there. Gonna undo both clamps on that and get this removed. There we go. This can be a little tough to pull off. Yep. So this is the orientation of this hose in the car. This is the intake manifold, and this goes to the valve cover. And we're actually gonna flip it back around to where the 90-degree section is facing up. This will go back to the intake manifold, and this will connect to our AOS. Got that hose reinstalled down at the intake manifold. This 90-degree section facing up. Leave the valve cover open for now, and this will connect to our AOS here in a minute.
Now if we bring our attention back to the front of the engine, we're going to be removing these two Jubilee clamps or worm clamps. They are, so that one here and this one here, they are security style clamps, so you have to either, hopefully you can see here, cut a slit in it with a Dremel so that you can then use a flathead screwdriver to unscrew it. Or on this one, I ended up having to cut down the line of the clamp just to release it because it wasn't undoing with the flat head screwdriver slit. But we are going to be supplying you with new clips anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But hopefully, if that's undone enough, we're going to remove these two, one and two. Excellent. I'm going to remove this OEM coolant line. As you can see, it's welded to the pipe we removed for the crankcase ventilation system earlier, so we don't want it to rub and chafe and cause any damage, and it's just bulky and in the way. So we're going to, as you can see, I'm using these hose clamps. They're really worth getting, they don't cost much, and it's going to stop you making a massive mess anytime you deal with any coolant or possibly fuel or brake lines. So we're going to put those on. We're going to get our hose clamp pliers, and we're going to remove both of the clamps on either end. Hopefully you can see. So one right on this end, it feeds under here, and then again we'll do the same the other end. And then remembering the old trick of getting some pliers on the hose and just giving it a bit of side-to-side action, that will help break the seal, which means it's going to be easier to remove. Same on this end. And then we should be able to pull these off. There's one. You can try and be a bit more graceful than me, but I'll get the job done. And there's the second. So a little bit of coolant's come out, as you can see. It's kind of unavoidable. You could put some rags underneath if you wanted to avoid that, but it's not much. So that's how to remove this OEM pipe.
Routing our hoses, we're going to route this one first. It's going to be our shorter of the two lengths, but the angle of this is pointed up. So we need to loosen these. It's where we use our 5.5 mil socket, and actually rotate this. Just do about a 1/2 inch, just enough to level this out, and then we'll tighten these back down. Now we're going to run this section of hose. Don't forget your hose clamp right here. And we need to run our 1/2 inch to 3/8 reducer. That plugs in like that. And basically, I'm going to go from here under this between there and around the back. Under there. Plug that in. Like so. And that's about where that's going to sit. Bring it a little closer. Vents there. Under that again. Around. I go behind this vacuum line, and then we'll route it towards where the AOS is going to mount right here. We'll just leave that be for now, and we'll route the longer section. Our longer section has the same idea. Don't forget your hose clamp. That on there. They're a 1/2 inch to 3/8 adapter. And there like so. And then it's actually going to route under this, or over this rather, over everything. Plug that in like so. And then I'm going to go under and follow this harness around back, and it'll run on top of this hose we just ran. Actually goes under the hose we just ran. My apologies. Get up close with this one we just ran. This is the longer 37-inch hose. Goes to the valve cover, over this vacuum line, goes through there, and then I follow this wire loom around on top of it, loops here, and then loops behind this line again, and then it actually runs underneath the hose we just ran. So those will go to our AOS. It's going to mount over here in a second. These can be routed any way you see fit. These are just the tightest locations we could get. Now that our hoses are ran, I need to show you where our AOS bracket is actually going to mount. This one, we already uncovered this threaded hole. We're going to use a pre-existing hole on the strut tower as well. This one right here. This electrical bracket will attach to that. It should be sitting up there like this currently. And you remove the 10mm that mounts that to reveal that threaded hole there. When we go in with the AOS, it's going to go AOS bracket onto the strut tower, and then the electrical bracket is going to go on top of that, and then we'll install our M6 hardware. At this time, if you do not have the coolant add-on kit, the OEM metal pipe that goes here, you're going to disconnect the two coolant lines that are left, that are connected now, and you're going to grab this piece and with it clipped in, turn it back this way, and this rear one, you're going to remove it here, run it back around this way. Ours is ran under the wire loom here. And they're going to connect out here like this. And connect like that. Throw your clamps on, tie it up out of the way, and that will be your loop for the non-coolant add-on. Here's our fully assembled coolant add-on kit. Feel free to use any oil or lube to help get these hoses on. It's not going to hurt anything. This one is going to be kind of the driver's side fitting. Point it straight down and put the long section, the 33-inch section of hose onto it. Tighten that clamp, tighten that banjo bolt. This banjo bolt I would leave loose until you have your 15-inch section of hose all the way on. Because it is such a tight fit between the head of this screw and the bracket, go ahead and get that all the way on, and then tighten down your banjo, tighten down your clamp, and that is ready to go on the car. I'm going to throw the AOS on here. It's kind of hard to show, so down here on the strut tower hole, just remember it goes strut tower, AOS bracket, and then the electrical connector bracket. And then this one up here is pretty self-explanatory. So we're gonna put the coolant add-on kit onto our car. So we're gonna fish this down here. Get the hoses out of the way. And grab our button head cap screw with a washer on it. Kind of block your view for a second. That one started, a couple threads. Throw this one in here. Then we'll go ahead and tighten these down. The coolant line that goes to the factory metal hard line up here, this rear one, we're gonna disconnect it, feed it back through here, undo all that, and reroute it back behind the engine. I do it underneath all the AOS lines, and then we're going to throw this barb fitting and connect it to the short hose onto our AOS. So throw this in here, connect it there, use our clamps, and then we'll connect our large hose after. You may need to use oil on these barbs as well. Our long section of coolant hose from the AOS is going to connect out here. Use that same 5/16 connector with a hose clamp and route it underneath the wire harness and around. Back around the back side of the engine, under everything, and then back out to there. Make sure all of your hose clamps and or factory clamps are in place and tightened down. Whether you have the coolant add-on kit or not, you're going to have clamps to worry about over here as well as over here. Tighten these hose clamps down as well. These are going to, if you don't, these are going to cause a vacuum leak, and you're going to be able to hear it. You're going to have performance issues. So if you start it up after the install, check for vacuum leaks, check for coolant leaks, all of the above. And those are my last two clamps to tighten. Everything's tight, 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 and tight because I have the coolant add-on. And then we're going to connect all of the hoses to our AOS right here. In order from driver's side to passenger side, we're going to have, this is our long 1/2-inch hose that goes to the actual valve cover over here. The next one over is going to be our shorter 1/2-inch that goes to our intake inlet. This one is going to be our factory PCV hose that we flipped a 180 on earlier. And this end one is going to be the 6-inch section that goes from here to the back of the valve cover. I'm going to get all those connected, and then we're going to zip tie all of our AOS connections to make sure they stay secured. So this one receives the factory clamp, so we don't need to worry about it. I am going to zip tie all of these. Use your remaining zip ties to tie up all your hoses up out of the way. You don't want them rubbing on each other, rubbing on sharp edges like clamps or machine marks on the engine. So go ahead and clip all your zip tie tails, zip tie everything into place, put your wire harness back, and then we'll throw the engine cover back on after we check for vacuum leaks. Once you're happy with all of your hose routing, all your zip ties are in place, all your clamps are tight, go ahead and start it up, check for vacuum leaks, and then once that's all verified, throw your engine cover back on. Once all your AOS hoses are in place, your coolant lines are in place, go ahead, check all your clamps one more time, check all your zip ties, make sure everything's up out of the way, and then start it up. There are possibilities for vacuum leaks and or coolant leaks. Once you have none of those, go ahead and throw your engine cover back on and enjoy your new AOS system. If you have any comments, feedback, concerns, email us, support@veris-engineering.com, and I appreciate you tuning in.